Look, you would be forgiven for thinking, as I am, buying a few shares in Virgin Galactic, even though the share price on Wall Street has climbed to, I think, today about 47 US bucks. Nonetheless, US officials have approved the first commercial license to take consumers into space. Apparently, the company's hardware and software functioned well during a test flight, so Virgin Galactic are saying they will proceed towards their first fully crewed test flight this year. Well, why am I telling you that? Judging by the way we're going on Earth, we might be better off in space. In fact, the people who are dictating to us on coronavirus too often give the impression that they're already in space because they're not part of our world. I'm convinced we're being run by know-alls. Politicians forget they're public servants. You can't fit 25 million people into the parliament, so we elect 151 in the lower house to represent us. Who are they representing? Well, not Kevin, who told us last night they've almost locked down the entire country due to a handful of cases. They are power mad. Not Jordan, who texted last night amongst thousands of texts, and they were angry. Our government needs to stop the fear-mongering tactics. Lachlan, such a tiny percentage of the population is no reason to lock down a nation. But at least half of Australia today is in lockdown. Laura text, this virus has mutated into a full-scale totalitarian dictatorship. Or as Tammy said, we're being herded up by a pandemic-panicked government, unquote. Well, we can never forget what Professor Ramesh Thakur told us last night. He said, freedom died of COVID. Unchecked medical tyranny seems hell-bent on destroying freedom in Western society with the presumption that we're all sick, whether we know it or not, or will soon be sick, and we must be dealt with as potential germ-ridden disease carriers who pose a constant threat to all others. And as Professor Thakur warned last night, quote, the entire machinery of state, backed by a fear-peddling media and the unprecedented censorship of social media by big tech, has been let loose upon our citizens, unquote. Well, it continues by the hour. There are no coronavirus cases in Alice Springs, but we were told this morning that Alice Springs is in a 72-hour lockdown from 1 p.m. today. But to tell the story, this dope, the Chief Minister, Michael Gunner, appropriately named, does he know he's going to make a fool of himself if he hadn't already done so? Here is a bloke who knows so little, he's actually reading from a script. Look at this.
It is unlikely that he was highly infectious during his time at Alice Springs Airport. But, like all our other decisions, we will not take a punt on this. We will operate on the assumption that he has COVID-19, and we will operate on the assumption that he was infectious while in the territory.
See that? Hear that? A lockdown based on an assumption. Good luck policing that rubbish. But don't forget, not a case in Alice Springs, but the Territory is in, quote, a dangerous period. The only danger of the Northern Territory is that it's being run by people like this fellow. But the idiocy of these people is beyond expression. A mine worker in the Northern Territory tested negative, but the rest of the household tested positive. And this fellow Gunner is almost sorry that the bloke tested negative. Listen to this.
He didn't test positive. That's absolutely accurate. The reason why he tested negative we're not clear of right now.
You've got to laugh. The bloke's unhappy for the negative test. Then you go to Perth. People terrified, hundreds of people waiting hours in long queues to find out if they were sick. Has the Victorian government learned something? There will be a pause in coronavirus restrictions there for the next 7 days, even though how do you plan anything with the thought that these totalitarian leaders may change their minds? Remember, only a couple of days ago, we were told that the AstraZeneca vaccine was not for people under 60. I'll be looking at this vaccine issue shortly on tonight's program, but on Monday night, the Prime Minister said the National Cabinet had mandated AstraZeneca. I think the National Cabinet involves premiers, doesn't it? Mandated AstraZeneca for aged care workers. So they all have to have it, presumably to keep their job. But now, if you're under 60, you can have it too, even though it was banned 2 weeks ago for people under 60. Remember I've told you confusion and fear keep these dictators in control? But hang on, the National Cabinet is going to indemnify doctors, which means they know there's a risk to you under 60 from AstraZeneca. But the doctors won't be responsible. How can you endorse a medical treatment where the risks may outweigh the benefits? the National Cabinet is in disarray. The Prime Minister has opened the floodgates on this AstraZeneca issue. 10:45 today, you've got Jeanette Young in Queensland saying she doesn't want under 40s to get AstraZeneca. And she then talked about up to 49 deaths in the UK. Listen to this.
I don't want an 18-year-old in Queensland dying from a clotting illness who, if they got COVID, probably wouldn't die.
Oh, God. Is that putting your foot in it? We're standing the nation on its head, and the Chief Health Officer admits in Queensland that from COVID, an 18-year-old probably wouldn't die. But hang on, they've been locked down, traumatised and demoralised. It is a living death. I told you this National Cabinet was useless. The Prime Minister has just been thrown under a bus. I repeat, he opened the floodgates. Anyone can get AstraZeneca. Well, Gladys Berejiklian said this at 11:30 this morning.
In New South Wales, if you're over 60, get the AstraZeneca vaccine. If you're over 40, we welcome you to get the Pfizer vaccine.
Oh, that's chucking the Prime Minister on a bus. I mean, what has to be immensely disturbing is that she was asked about the National Cabinet recommendations, where the Prime Minister virtually said open slather on AstraZeneca for everyone. Disturbingly, the New South Wales Premier has admitted that GPs wouldn't face any legal consequences if they administered the vaccine to anyone. Listen to what she said at 28 minutes past 11 this morning.
What National Cabinet agreed to, which is on the public record, is that GPs would not face any legal consequences if they administered the vaccine to anybody, to make sure that they can administer the vaccine with confidence depending on their health advice. And that's what National Cabinet agreed to. I'm not going to comment beyond that, but to say that if you're under 60 and you want the AstraZeneca, you should have a conversation with your GP.
I just find this completely beyond belief. There are only two words to describe it: irresponsible and chaotic. Add to that this alarmism over the Delta strain, which I answered last night, and to further confirm a completely fractured National Cabinet, the Queensland Premier is demanding an end to international travel, or what's left of it. But it's her government which has put another 3.8 million Australians into lockdown overnight. You see, a fly-in, fly-out miner called Patient Zero brought the virus from Darwin to Perth, but he contracted it in hotel quarantine in Brisbane. How the hell is that allowed? But it gets worse. Following the episode back in March, remember this at Princess Alexandra Hospital in Brisbane, where there were breaches of protocol resulting in 2 nurses and a doctor being infected. That led to a 72-hour lockdown. All hospital staff after that, with exposure to COVID patients, had to be vaccinated. Well, here's a 19-year-old receptionist allowed near a COVID hospital ward of Prince Charles Hospital, and she's unvaccinated. This is the point I'm making. The public suffer because government is amateur and stupid. Why wasn't the 19-year-old receptionist vaccinated? According to the Premier, her workstation was located outside the COVID isolation ward at Prince Charles Hospital. Can you believe this? The woman was apparently visibly sick at her desk for 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday of last week, and then flew to Townsville for a family holiday. How many doctors or nurses from the COVID ward must have walked past the reception desk and no one noticed she was ill? Anastasia Palaszczuk forget Scott Morrison and blaming him for the snail-paced vaccine rollout and whether the hotel quarantine system is good enough. Get your own house in order. A 19-year-old receptionist is outside the COVID ward when the rules are that all hospital staff with exposure to COVID patients must be vaccinated, and she's not. And she was sick for 2 days, no one notices, and she takes off to Townsville for a family holiday. It's like having your backside on fire and wondering where the smoke is coming from. We are prisoners of incompetence. The chaos, confusion, the fear and alarmism all start with political leadership. Increasingly, the impression can't be avoided that not only do these people who are calling hourly press conferences and luxuriating in unprecedented publicity on TV, not only can't they explain where, in a policy sense, they've been, they seem to have no idea where we are meant to be going. They have been wrong too often. We shouldn't be following their edicts. We should be challenging them. Bring on debate. Put all the facts on the table. Let's see the health advice. We should be guided by the warning of the late American journalist Edward Murrow. And I quote him, "A nation of sheep will beget a government of wolves. What do you think? You email me, alan@skynews.com.au, or the text line 0414 000 848.